So the full database recently dropped for FC26, meaning that we now know nearly every player rating going into the new game. Today I'm going to go through some of the most shocking ratings that EA have given and also talk through my problem with the ratings overall, as I think that EA need to rethink how they do them going forward. So to split the video up, I'm going to start with just a few of the worst ratings that I've seen given to players this year, whether it's them being overrated or underrated. And later in the video I'll talk about my issues in general with how the ratings are just unfair in the game, and also how player potentials are out of control in career mode. But if I do miss out any ratings that you disagree with, let me know in the comments. I like to hear different opinions from people down there, and also consider liking the video to help support the channel, and subscribe if you haven't already. I post regular FC26 content on this channel, so let's jump into some of the ratings that I found online. So I'm not going to talk about ratings that are maybe like one overall too high or too low. For example, Harry Kane's been downgraded by 1, which is debatable. All of these debates and things I'm not going to go too much into. When it comes to the best players in the world, I think EA generally research them really well, and they obviously are going to give more accurate ratings, but it's when you go further down the list you get more and more of the bad ratings. I'm not going to talk about the lower league players and things like that because we'll be here all day, but definitely some of the notable players that you would have heard of and some of the shocking ratings that they've given to them. One thing to note before I start this video is that recently EA do tend to take last season's performance into account a lot more now as opposed to history. Now you'll see that in some of the ratings on here that EA do have a lot more recency bias than in some of their older games. I just want to add that context when I make a few points in this video. That ties in perfectly for our first candidate for overrated players in the game, and that is Andre Onana. Now how this guy has still got an 80 rating in the game just blows my mind. He was overrated last year, and last season was one of the worst individual seasons from a goalkeeper I think the Premier League has seen. Now don't get me wrong, he was a good goalkeeper a couple of years ago for Inter, but this is what I mean. You're going to see in some more of the ratings that EA do exaggerate the upgrades and downgrades based on last season. Andre Onana, on what basis is he an 80 rated goalkeeper? Is crazy. Just for some comparisons, apparently he's as good as Bert Leno, he's a better goalkeeper than Kelleher, Milinkovic-Savic at Napoli, and Ortega at Man City. Yeah. Next on the list, again we're sticking kind of Man United themed, is Antony. Now obviously he's left the club now, but 81 rated for Antony. Now I know last season he went on loan to Wrld for a couple of months and was doing really well, but this guy stunk it out for years, and I don't get how after a few months he has an 81 rating. Not just that, but an 84 potential, and as we know in career mode, players just hit their potential regardless. Again, for comparisons, that means that he is apparently a better winger than Semenyo at Bournemouth. Now, I'm going to put a photo up of the career mode tracker database and some of the most highly rated defensive midfielders in the game. Now, I have a couple of problems with this. How on earth is Tchouaméni at Real Madrid and Zubamendi at Arsenal both lower rated than Kante, Granit Xhaka and Çalhanoğlu? I don't get what EA are watching here. Like, you've got two of the best up-and-coming defensive midfielders starting for two of the best teams in the world. They're lower rated than Kante, who's been in the Saudi League for the last few years, Granit Xhaka, who's just gone to Sunderland, and Çalhanoğlu, who I've seen Inter Milan fans say that he had a poor season. How does this make any sense? But I'm going to turn now to a player who I think is constantly underrated in the game, and that is Jarrod Bowen at West Ham. He's been given an 83 rating from EA, despite being one of the top scorers in the Premier League for a team that isn't one of the top teams in the division. He's always underrated. Now let's compare him to some other attacking players in the league. And Wemo, who was at Brentford last season, don't get me wrong, he had a really good season and he was at a similar level to Bowen. So why is he 2 overalls more than Bowen, apart from him going to Man United, which I'm sure for some wild reason contributed to this rating? Tell me why that makes sense. Trossard being the same rating as Bowen, what Arsenal fan wouldn't trade Bowen for Trossard? Like, come on, let's be real. Anthony Gordon is apparently as good as Jarrod Bowen, and I'm scratching my head at that one. How can someone who scores consistently in the Premier League be the same rating as someone who's barely been able to score this year for a team that's a lot better? That's just completely incorrect. Now, a player who's been absolutely smashing it for the last 2 years, and that is Cole Palmer for Chelsea. Now, 87 rating for him is kind of debatable. Like, he could have maybe had a little bit higher, but I don't think it's a terrible rating in itself. Not until I put this photo up here. Apparently, Cole Palmer is as good as Martin Odegaard and Bruno Fernandes. In what world? In what world? And again, they base these a lot off of the previous season. In what world are those two players as good as Cole Palmer? Yeah, I don't know what EA were watching last season, honestly. And sticking with Odegaard, I'm sure a lot of Arsenal fans will agree with me when they say that Declan Rice and William Saliba are much more important to their team than Odegaard is, yet they're all the same rating. That's a bit of a bizarre one. Not even to mention Gyökeres, who I know they can't comment on that much because he's a new player. This is beyond exaggeration from EA. How on earth is Gyökeres an 87 rated player? Now, don't get me wrong, he's very good. I'm excited to see how he is in the Premier League, but I think people need to settle down a bit on the hype with Gyökeres. Let's remind ourselves that he was playing in the Championship. He was unreal in the Championship, to be fair, but since then, he's had 2 seasons in the Portuguese league, where admittedly he scored a lot of goals, but a lot of those are against not an amazing standard of club. Why does that warrant him being an 87 rating? 87 should be like one of the best players in your position. And again, compare him to Declan Rice, who's been one of the best midfielders in the world for the last few seasons. William Saliba, who again is being a top 5 centre half in the world in the last few years. Why on earth is Gyökeres on that level? Now, like I say, EA are basing these a lot on last season. Now, as you can see on this screenshot, that's why Bernardo Silva is only an 84 rating. He didn't have a good season, despite before that being like a really good player. But why is that logic not applied to James Maddison, who didn't really play a lot last season? Due to injury, admittedly, but Rodri got a downgrade for that. So why is Maddison higher rated than Szoboszlai, Eberici Eze, and Morgan Gibbs-White? Again, I feel like there's a bit of a contradiction with some of these ratings. Now, obviously, it's not just with overalls that we're seeing in the database now. A big part of career mode is also player potentials. Now, I'm going to talk more generally about player potentials a bit later in the video. How on earth has Oscar Bob only got an 82 potential? That is absolutely insane. Now, I want to add some context to this. EA just dish out really good potentials to literally anybody in the game. And I'm going to read through some names now who have the same potential or more than Oscar Bob, who's been starting games for Man City this season, by the way, and you can tell me if this sounds right. So he has the same potential as Koleosho, who was at Burnley last season. He wasn't an important player for them in the Championship. They've loaned him out this year because he wasn't going to play for them in a Premier League relegation scrap. Willie Gnonto at Leeds, again, he was in and out of the team last season in the Championship, and he's got an 83 potential. Odebert has got an 83 potential, he's barely really played for Tottenham. Do these players really have a higher ceiling than Oscar Bob? I don't see it. I made a post on X in regards to the next point that I'm going to make, and that is that I actually think the player ratings are unfair on certain positions in not only FC26, but pretty much any game in recent memory. I'm going to put this graphic on the screen, and you can see like how uneven the ratings are. So this kind of goes back to what I said with like Gyökeres being an 87 rated player. Now, just for context, if you compare him to a player in a different position, Nuno Mendes at PSG is an 86 rating. Now, we're talking about easily the best left back in the world. A guy who's the best in his position in the world has an 86 rating in FC26. That just doesn't seem right to me. And when you look at the players that are 87 or more rated in the game, look at how little defenders there are who have got those ratings. And yet, if you're a good striker, you just get a crazy rating. I just don't get how you can be the best left back in the world, and then a guy that scored a ton of goals in the Portuguese league for 2 seasons is rated higher than you. Like, that just doesn't make sense to me. And that applies to defenders in general. They're just too underrated in the game. I feel like that should be evened out with from EA in when they start doing the ratings again in the future. And I use Gyökeres as the example, but Osimhen and Guirassy at Dortmund, would they actually be more in demand in the football world than like a Cucurella or a Nuno Mendes? Of course not. Like, come on. It's the same with goalkeepers as well. I feel like they're a bit overrated in the game. So, yeah, when you look at the comparisons, it kind of shows that EA don't really compare players fairly relative to like the roles that they play on the pitch. Next, I'll talk about player potentials as well in the game. Now, I don't want to go too deep into this because I feel like when I started writing the prep for this video, I realised that this is a video in itself. But just in general, EA need to calm it down with the player potentials. For anyone that's played more than a couple of seasons in career mode, you'll know that the database just gets out of control with high-rated players. The quality of all the teams just goes completely out of control, and for me, it just kind of kills the immersion in the game. I won't go into any specific players that have a potential too high in the game because I feel like that applies to 90% of the players, and every player hits their potential in the game if they're at an AI club. So for me, all of the potentials, in a word, are okay because these players, they could reach those potentials, but the vast majority of players don't reach the potentials that EA give them in real life. So either EA need to calm it down with the potentials, or they need to add potential ranges, add some sort of new system for player growth. This is going to be another video that I'll make. Just to read out something that I picked up on in the database. I looked at players that are aged 23 or under and have an 87 potential or more. Now, the number of players that fit that category is 73. Just for a comparison, the amount of 87 rated players in the database in general is 49. That's around 50% more, and that doesn't take into consideration all of the players who are older than 23 who are either 87 rated or more or have a potential to reach a higher rating, and also all of the older players that have got an 87 or more potential. Obviously, when they retire, they'll get replaced with a regen who has a potential to get to that level as well. So obviously this is the case all the way down the ratings in the database, and that's just the example I wanted to use to show that it's out of control. So for me, EA need to rethink how they rate players in the game, and if they don't want to, then please make it easier for us to edit players in the game. I've already designed a quick edit feature for players to just go through the database and edit overalls and potentials really quickly. This would be so much better than what we have currently, and I really hope that EA do add this in the game, because if they did, no career mode player would really have much of a right to complain about player ratings being unrealistic, because we'd be able to fix it a lot easier. So yeah, going forward, better customization would be a solution for EA, and if they want to hire actual scouts like Football Manager do, then maybe we'll actually see a database that would be more representative of real life. I didn't even mention like the EFL leagues in England. Again, every player seems to be 1 or 2 ratings too low. Like, it's just consistently too low, and I'm comparing that to like how they're rated in Football Manager. So yeah, there's a load of problems that I think EA need to fix there. But I want to hear from you guys in the comments. What are the worst ratings that you've seen for FC26? And also let me know, do you have a problem with how the ratings are created by EA? Let me know in the comments all your thoughts on the video. Hit a like if you haven't already and you enjoyed the video. And if you're not already subscribed, make sure to hit that red button to keep in the loop of all of my FC26 and other football gaming content. But yeah, thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.